Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k Necrons. We've got yet another review for you today from one of the units within the Necron Index, and today we're going to be looking at the Skorpekh Destroyers, a prolific unit from the 9th edition, one of our melee units. Let's see how they fare for 10th edition. As always, we're going to get into the datasheet, and let's begin with the rear side of the data card, and we're going to start with their points. So 110 points will get you 3 Skorpekh Destroyers, and of course that would mean 220 points will give you 6. You can only get them in units of either 3 or units of either 6, you can't get any in-betweens anymore. Now in 9th edition, these guys were 90 points for 3, or 180 points for 6, so they have gone up by 20 points for the 3. However, as you can see from the war gear options on the left side of the data card, for every 3 models in the unit you can have a plasma sight. Now in 9th edition the plasma sights were 15 points, so that kind of makes them in effect cheaper than they were in 9th edition, except you are now forced to pay for a plasma sight, and the plasma sight is completely different this edition, but we'll get onto all that in a moment. So every model is equipped with the Skorpekh Hyperphase weapons, so notice now there isn't the Reap Blades and the Threshers anymore, they've all just been merged into Skorpekh Hyperphase weapons. Before we flip over the card, let's quickly look at those keywords, infantry and Skorpekh Destroyer, so nothing really of note, there's no Destroyer cult anymore, and of course the core has gone. So let's flip the card over and let's check out the stats to begin. So a movement of 7 inches, they've lost an inch in movement. That's quite standard for this edition for Necrons now. We seem to be losing our movement. Normally it's 1 point of movement, so yeah, it's kind of standard. However, the toughness has gone up to 6, which is pretty nice. It means strength 5 weapons such as heavy bolters are going to struggle. They still require 5s to wound, so your opponent is going to have to start putting better weapons into these guys in order to shift them. The save is a 3+, they've got 3 wounds each, that is as it was. Leadership is a 7+, and the objective control is 2. So not much has really changed there. We lost a bit of movement for a bit of toughness. I'm okay with that. I think that's probably a good thing rather than a bad thing. Let's move down into the weapons area, the melee weapons, which of course they have. Skorpekh Hyperphase weapons. As mentioned, they've all been merged into one now. Now these are attacks 4. They previously were attacks 3 or 4, depending on what weapon you have, but again, we've merged everything here. Weapon skill 3+, strength 7, -2 AP and 2 damage. Now the AP is worse because it was either -4 AP with the Reap Blades or -3 AP with the Hyperphase Threshers in 9th edition. It's neither of those now, it's just -2. That is the big grand AP reset, I suppose. And yeah, we have gained an extra attack, but the Threshers used to give us an extra attack anyway. But you got to now remember that we've got 6 of these models all at strength 7 rather than having 2 at strength 7 and 4 at strength 5. So even though we've lost a little bit of AP and damage, we've kind of gained because we've now got 6 of them with a decent weapon. So if you're looking at in terms of attacks for the full unit, you're going to have 24 attacks. Now they're not as useful as they used to be in 9th edition going up against monsters and vehicles, because those kind of models have gone up in toughness. They've gone up to toughness 10, toughness 11, toughness 12, and we've stayed on our strength of strength 7. So we're going to be wounding those kind of models on a 5+, which means they're not really the same in terms of a target now. The target's going to be completely different for 10th edition than it was for 9th. So this makes this unit more of an elite infantry killer, maybe even just a standard Space Marine killer if you like, because of the damage being just damage 2, and the strength 7 means you're pretty much always wounding on a 3+. You don't want to be going against 1 wound models because then you're likely going to be wounding on a 2+, but then the damage is wasted because it's damage 2. So even though we've kind of gained a bit of buff with the weaponry, we've kind of lost out because the monsters and vehicles in this edition have massively increased in terms of toughness, whereas the strength of this weapon just hasn't followed. So there are ways of buffing the Skorpekh Hyperphase weapons. One of the ways would be using the Protocol of Hungry Avoid, which is a stratagem for 1 command point used in any player's fight phase. And you effectively add 1 to the strength to make them strength 8. And if you've got a character leading the units, the AP will improve by 1 to -3 AP. Now I'm not suggesting strength 8 will be enough. Going up against toughness 10, it's going to have no effect in fact. However, going up against the standard toughness 4 model, like a Space Marine again, you're now wounded on a 2+, so it does assist you in that manner, and -3 AP rather than -2 AP gives them a 6+ armor save. So I'm kind of getting the feeling here that infantry, particularly infantry that are elite units, or Space Marines, I call them sort of elite units now comparatively to like Guardians and stuff, they are definitely the target for the Skorpekh Destroyers. So we've got the abilities next, the faction ability, of course, Reanimation Protocols. They've then got a unique ability called Whirling Onslaught. Now this used to be a stratagem which it previously was a -1 to wound for 1 command point. It was really good, very effective. It's now not that anymore, unfortunately. So what it is now is each time model in the unit makes a melee attack, you can ignore any or all modifiers to the weapon skill and the hit roll. So if your opponent's got a -1 to hit, for example, you just ignore it. Yeah, I mean, whatever, right? It's okay. Sometimes it comes in handy, but I prefer what we used to have with the -1 to wound. I think that was so much better. But that has now been given to the Lich Guard, I believe. They've now got that when they've got a noble in the unit. But yeah, that's what they've got in terms of the ability. As for the war gear abilities, we mentioned it in the intro, we've got the Plasma Sight. And we could potentially have 2 of them in a max unit. So what does a Plasma Sight do in this edition? Because in last edition it was an extra model, you pay 15 points, it could literally go on its own. But if it was out of unit coherency, then it did end up getting destroyed. But it had its own uses like charging and things like that. Now it's virtually like an ability. So once per battle for each Plasma Sight this unit has, when the unit is selected to fight, you can use this ability. And if you do so, then until the end of the phase, melee weapons have the Devastating Wounds ability. If you score a 6 to wound, an unmodified wound roll of a 6, your opponent will not get a save, and it will just be 2 mortal wounds, because that's what the damage is on the Skorpekh Hyperphase weapons. So it bypasses the armor save, bypasses the in-1 saves. It won't bypass Feel No Pain saves, but most units don't have that anyway. So in 2 fight phases within the entire game, you can activate this Plasma Sight, and then you've got this Devastating Wounds ability. Now unfortunately, going back to 9th edition again, we've got to make those comparisons. We used to have the Destroy Cult ability, I can't remember what it's called now, but it used to be a reroll our hit rolls of a 1. We've not got that anymore. But we can of course now include a character which would be a Skorpekh Lord to get the hitting on a 2+ now. So that is still there effectively, even though it's a little bit different I suppose. It's like having My Will Be Done in fact from 9th edition. But in fact let's talk about the Skorpekh Lord, because that's the only natural leader for the Skorpekh Destroyers. He's got 2 abilities that will relate to Skorpekh Destroyers. The first one is United in Destruction. While this model is leading a unit, melee weapons equipped with the models in this unit have the Lethal Hits ability. So any unmodified hit rolls of a 6 will automatically wound. You won't need to roll to wound, your opponent still gets a save. Now I personally don't like that. And the reason I don't like that is because if you're using the Plasma Sights with Devastating Wounds and you're potentially bypassing the wound roll because of the Lethal Hits ability, then it means you've got less opportunities to have Devastating Wounds because you've already automatically wound. You don't get to roll for those 6s. So they kind of don't go together. I know like getting a 6 to hit and then a 6 to wound, you still got enough chances to do it. But I just think you're slightly minimising your chance of getting the Devastating Wounds because of the Lethal Hits ability. Even though the Lethal Hits ability in itself is a good ability. So I don't like that synergy to begin. The second one is the Crimson Harvest. Each time this model ends a charge move, select one enemy unit within engagement range of it, roll 1d6, on a 2, 3, 4 or a 5 they suffer d3 mortal wounds, and on a 6 they suffer d3+3 mortal wounds. Now I quite like that, that's okay, that's pretty decent. And of course your Skorpekh Lord is going to be going with the Skorpekh Destroyers, so that effectively does apply, because that'll be potentially 1 or 2 models off the board before you've even started fighting. So that will assist you in fact in terms of the the remainder of that turn. Now before moving on, in fact I want to talk about some enhancements that you could potentially use for the Skorpekh Lord if you were to select him. The first one I want to talk about is the Veil of Darkness relic. Now the Veil of Darkness isn't as good as it used to be. It used to be able to work within engagement range. You effectively take your unit off at the end of your opponent's turn, and then you come back in on your own turn in your movement phase, off the board for the command phase, but you can still do reanimation protocols, that is okay. You'll find that you can do that, I think it was in the rules commentary under reserves, somewhere under reserves, it says you can use abilities even if you are in reserves, which is where this unit will be placed. Then you're effectively deep striking in your movement turn, more than 9 inches away, horizontally from all enemy units. So it's a risky play I suppose, because you're now expected to make a charge, and it's a 9-inch charge. So with 2 dice, the odds are not in your favour. Only slightly. You've still got a chance to do it, and you've got a CP reroll potentially if you want to burn one there. Once you do get in, it's pretty good. But if you don't make it, you're kind of leaving your unit in the open, especially in a position where you've deep struck in. The likelihood is it's not going to be near your deployment zone, otherwise you wouldn't have used the Veil in the first place. Now you could also just save the Veil of Darkness for scoring objectives late game or behind enemy lines, that kind of thing, or just getting into a better position. But some people do like to burn it early and just try to get into a nice charge nice and early and take out a unit. Now we will talk about another enhancement in a moment, but I just wanted to mention a few protocols that could relate to having the Skorpekh Lord within the unit. The protocol of Undying Legions, first of all, to activate reanimation protocols as soon as you lose a model. And if you've got a character within the unit, it'll be D3 plus 1. So an average of 3 wounds coming back, which would in fact give you an entire model back. The one that was lost, in fact, will be back. So that's one thing you could do. And of course, if you've got the reanimator there, you get another D3 and you know all the stuff there. Second one is Heroic Intervention. This is from the core rule, but this isn't a Necron index stratagem. It's from the core rules, but it is 2 command points, so they're a bit pricey. But in your opponent's charge phase, just after your enemy unit's ended a charge move, you select a unit within 6 inches of an enemy unit that will be eligible to declare a charge move against the enemy units in your charge phase, as if it was your charge phase. And then you effectively are declaring a charge on your enemy unit, even though it's not your turn. And then you're going to have the Fight First ability because you've heroically intervened. Which again, you're still in movement there, in fact, because it's not even your turn. You're getting that 6-inch movement. You're then getting to Fight First. Potentially you're getting to, if you're not into base, you're going to be piling in, consolidating perhaps. There's all extra things you can do in terms of movement with Heroic Intervention. Right, let's talk about that second enhancement, which is the Sovereign Coronal. I'm not gonna rant this video. I did that in the last video. But yeah, your Skorpekh Destroyers can turn on the being led ability, so you're effectively your command protocols and the stratagems and whatnot. And it doesn't have to be the Skorpekh Lord. For example, it could be the Command Barge. The Command Barge can take this enhancement. That's a nice way of doing it because the Command Barge has a Resurrection Orb. So in your opponent's command phase, you can pop the orb. And again, if you've got a Canoptic Reanimator, it's an extra D3. In fact, speaking of the Reanimator, I'll just show you that on the screen because I've kind of jumped the gun there. The Reanimator will give you D3 additional in the reanimation protocols. But yeah, that's all the synergy I wanted to really mention in this video. There's probably a few other bits and bobs, but I think all the main synergy has been covered. So I want to move on to the battlefield role for the Skorpekh Destroyers. Very different to what it was in 9th edition. This edition, I think they're elite infantry killers. Not so much to be hitting the heavy stuff. Don't go after monsters, don't go after vehicles. I mean, vehicles, potentially you could tie them up, but you've got cheaper units to do that. You don't need to be using Skorpekh Destroyers that are 110 points for 3 of them. You don't need to use them. You could just use Scarabs, for example. But the days of taking down Imperial Knights with your Skorpekh Destroyers, I believe, are long gone. You're not going to be doing that this edition. Now, oddly, even though I feel they are worse, they've gone up in price. But for me, they're just not as powerful as they were. Nowhere near. I believe that the strength of the weapon should match what the monsters and vehicles toughness has gone up to, even if it was just strength 10. That would be enough for me. Because yes, you could use, if there's a monster or vehicle that's toughness 11, you can use Protocol of Hungry Void to get to strength 11 to match that, so you're wounded on a 4+, or give us a +1 to the wound roll, something like what the Amarkia the Traveller can give. That's something that I would have preferred to have seen with the Skorpekh Destroyers. But unfortunately, I don't see it that way. So let's get on to the pros and cons for the Skorpekh Destroyers. Starting with the pros, you get the 2 plasma sights, which are free in this edition. 1 for every 3 models in the unit, so a max unit will get you 2 of them, and they're going to provide you with devastating wounds for that fight phase. Not too bad. You're now toughness 6 with these models. They used to be toughness 5, so I quite like that. You're going to have to put a lot more into them, or better weaponry into them to get rid of them. Good. Now, all models have a better weapon because we used to have the hyperphase threshers on 4 of the models, which were only strength 5. We've now got strength 7 with all 6 of them, even though 2 of the models used to have the reap blades, which were slightly better, damage 3, but they've kind of merged them out into one single weapon now. Still think it's a better improvement than it was in 9th. Now, the hit rolls ignore modifiers with the Whirling Onslaught ability. That's something to add to the pros, I guess. But as for the cons, there's quite a lot of cons, to be honest with you. They're slower in movement with only 7 inches. They're more expensive on points, 110 for 3, not 90 for 3 like they used to be. They didn't get a strength boost in 10th edition. We just kind of mentioned that in the battlefield role. I believe they should have been strength 10 or +1 to wound or something like that. They did not get that. So they're not monsters and vehicle hunters anymore. They've only got 1 natural leader, which is the Skorpekh Lord, unless you're using the enhancement for the Coronal Aura. So Skorpekh Lord, I don't rate it, to be honest with you, because in fact that is my next point. There's a clash with the lethal hits and devastating wounds with the Plasma Sight ability. Yes, it is minimal, but it is still something that I just don't like the clash of that. You've got no rerolls of 1s anymore, and of course there are no range attacks because this is just a melee unit. They've lost the -1 to wound stratagem, which has now changed to the Whirling Onslaught, which is what it is now. And finally, Warscythe Lich Guards are just a lot better. They're only 2 inches slower. There's just a lot more to them, but yeah, we'll get onto that in their own video, I suppose. So I suppose we better get onto the Planet 40k rating for the Skorpekh Destroyers. Now, in my opinion, in 9th edition, this was one of our top tier units. Top level unit. It was probably S or A. I can't remember where I put it at. I can't remember now. It was quite a while ago, wasn't it? Since we've done one of these Planet 40k reviews for the Skorpekh Destroyers. This edition, I'm going to be honest, guys, I think they stink. I think they absolutely suck because Lich Guard do it better in terms of anti-elite infantry, and they're not doing anything really against monsters and vehicles. So what do you do with them? What is the purpose of them now? There's only one natural leader for them, whereas the Lich Guard have got multiple leaders, and I can't see myself using them this edition. So it's got to be a 2-star. So guys, you're going to have to let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you agree with this? This one's a bit of a shock to me. While I was doing this video, I was just thinking about this, and I knew they were going to be sort of average, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, they're garbage. They're garbage. So yeah, you'll have to let me know, and make sure you are subscribing on your exits. But guys, thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.